Now you're on. And call the meeting to order. Yeah, I call the meeting to order. Of the second meeting of the Agri-Tourism Committee. Tonight is February 21st and it's 6:03 p.m. And so now I would ask that we do roll call for you. I'll do it. Okay, Chair Darren Swank, Vice Chair Simon Fernandez. Oh, right. Vice Chair Joseph Chalmers is absence unavoidable. He's out of town. Committee member Simon Fernandez and committee member Marty Holman. I know that we're also waiting for Mrs. Holman, but we can get started. As I mentioned, we have it's our second meeting, and we have included some professionals to help us through the conversation. So there you go. There we go. There is Stephen Hall.
All right, good evening, everybody.
Sure. Okay. We really don't have a whole lot of different zoning districts in town. Primarily, we are agricultural residential, or AR5 or RR5. It's called a variety of different things, but it's agricultural residential. We have some commercial, but not all commercial on Southern Boulevard. Within the commercial on Southern Boulevard, we also have a mixed use PUD, and that's the Groves at Town Center, and it has a combination of uses. Aside from that, the only other commercial that we have in town is that which was approved by the county prior to the town's incorporation. And I believe that there are 2 properties on Okeechobee that have an existing commercial designation. Okay, so basically, the whole town is agricultural residential. Yeah. Well, I think that in talking with our attorneys after the last meeting, one of the concerns that was raised, and we also talked to Stephen about this, one of the concerns raised is that the task from the council is to look at how we might modify the proposed ordinance or come to a place where we could have a balance between neighbors, between agritourism and non-agritourism neighbors. So to that end, we did ask Mr. Hall to take a look at our ordinance. And we wanted to kind of go over some of that with you. And also, by the way, Ruth Holmes, our attorney, I would defer to her with regard to that. And then Alice Harris is here from the Agritourism Association because they wish to do the best management practices too, and thought that might be a good place for us to have that conversation. So we can go through the ordinance as quickly as you'd like. I hope that's helpful. Yeah. I mean, we can ask Mr. Hall to take a quick walk through his comments because he did that with us. He doesn't have a whole lot, but he did have a lot of insight. Is that good with you, Mr. Hall?
I'm happy to provide whatever help I can provide.
one of the things we talked about at the last meeting was that I'm just going to do some key points. Tell me if I'm off base because this is what we talked to with Mr. Hall. We didn't want to have anything that increased the onus on agritourism, meaning that it needed to be the same for everybody in town. And so if we already had something for noise, that we would use whatever we had for noise. If we already had something for traffic, we would use whatever we had for traffic. And also, there was another thing that we were concerned about as well, but not the vibration. We did not want to look at the odor. Yeah. And then, of course, the conversation we had about odor is very hard to regulate because farms smell. So I think that's where we left. And the other conversation was how to define substantial. And that's where we got our most help from Mr. Hall. He talked to us about the things that looked like perhaps regulation that we needed to maybe, recast the statements. And he also provided us with an FAQ that he's providing everybody that calls, with regard to what is agritourism and how do we regulate it. Is that a good recharacterization, Mr. Hall? We don't hear you.
Because I have to push the unmute button. Sorry about that. Yes, I think that's for the most part. That's correct. And I can only hear you speaking. I cannot hear anybody at the table speaking if
Hit their microphones
if
then?
there's other conversations going on or questions.
I have to.
I think the button's on top. There you go. I think it, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, by the way, I was gonna make the same comment is that, agritourism that we have is such a benefit, in my opinion. Maybe we're biased, but, I would think small towns, especially rural, would want the agritourism. It improves, in my opinion, the quality of life for the residents, and it does so many good things. And I don't mean to be long-winded, but I thought to myself, why would we be creating an ordinance that is going to further restrict that beyond? And I think that's what Mr. Hall has already said, but that was going to be my comment. So am I to understand that it sounds like everybody's in agreement in that what we're doing here is the ordinance is going to be aspects that are going to do anything but further restrict agritourism. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, by the way, Simon Fernandez, Okeechobee, been following and studying agritourism and researching it since 2010. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Fernandez. Yes.
So I visited a lot of different operators throughout the state. And when this came up, in my first meeting, which is recorded, I clearly stated, and I think we're in agreement that this is an unnecessary exercise from the town. We already have laws in place. State law protects us, and this state law was precisely produced for the same reason. Some of us had small disagreements with neighbors, and they were corrected. So apparently, because of some complaints, is what, as I understand, this came about. In agreement with you that there's plenty of stuff already in the law, and to sort of mess with that veil of protection that we get from the agritourism law, it's unnecessary. Thank you.
Well, so we're back to square one.
Can I just jump in here?
Go ahead, Ruth.
Stephen, this is Ruth Holmes, the attorney. Just from a common sense standpoint, I understand, nobody in the industry is excited about an ordinance that appears on its face to add more regulation onto agritourism, and that's not the intent. I think one of the phrases that we have to wrestle with, and I don't think it's unique to Loxahatchee Groves, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, but the phrase substantial impacts, what are they? And how can any community balance the right for agritourism operators to operate their events, their facility, but yet also manage to keep the peace and the public safety in the surrounding communities. And so the draft ordinance was an attempt to define, to give some certainty or to give some almost kind of a heads up to agritourism operators who exist or who may be coming into the community. Look, we think that these particular things would rise to the level of substantial impacts, just so everybody's on the same page. And that's all the ordinance is intended to do. I am not advocating by any stretch, got to pass this ordinance, but the Agritourism Committee is here to do a couple things. And that's to recommend to the town council what the committee thinks that substantial offsite impacts would be, and make recommendations how to measure those impacts to the surrounding community. What really might make them substantial? Is there a quantifiable measurement? And how can things be mitigated? What steps can be taken to reduce the impacts to the surrounding residential neighborhood without impacting the agritourism event? So that's kind of that's what the committee was created to do. It's not very exciting. I get it. I will say, Mr. Swank, that with the BMPs, we took a look at that, and we think that there's a couple impediments to this committee at this time developing BMPs. Number one, it's outside the scope of what the charge is for the committee. That said, if private folks wanted to develop those, or if an association, the Agritourism Association or Florida Farm Bureau or whoever wanted to come up with BMPs, that's completely on your own, and it might be something that is a good idea. But the town, if it adopted BMPs, it might be viewed as too much regulation, and it might be viewed as actually contrary to the statute itself.
All right. So then how do you want to proceed with what we're doing here then, Ruth?
Well,
And we could sit here and debate how many cars is too many for any facility. We could debate how much noise is too much, what the hours of the noise would be. My problem is with the noise or any of these other issues. I mean, on my property day and night, I hear Dixie choppers, chainsaws, weed blowers, weed whackers, machinery all day long. That's certainly above voice level. So if these folks can do that, and that's kind of an irritating sound, and opposed to something that's musical, that's quite pleasant, how do you define something that's obnoxious and opposed to something that's not?
I think
And
it's
if these folks could do that all day, then why couldn't you have music all day? I mean, I don't complain about these sounds. But I certainly could. I just don't.
Mr. Chair, if you
Hit
allow
the
me.
microphone, please.
That one keeps
Gotta
going.
press the.
Set
mic.
up.
Yep.
If you may, if you allow me, please. Mr. Hall, once again, thank you for coming and to the association as well. Thank you for being present. How is traditionally the state have taken into consideration or put into effect the quantification of substantial?
So great. That's a great question. So let me just kind of reset, just for the record. My name is Stephen Hall. I'm the Assistant Deputy Commissioner for the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for the great question. Maybe let me just use that as a question, kind of set some parameters and some background about how the statute works and how we at the department have seen it work, and mainly me through conversations with counties and municipal staffs and agritourism producers, et cetera, around the state. All right. So to your direct question, substantial, that term substantial, I want to be careful because it's more than just the word. The statute prohibits local government regulation of agritourism activity on land classified as agricultural. So that's the first part. But it does not limit the power of local governments to address substantial offsite impacts of agritourism activities or in an emergency situation. So there's multiple things that local governments can regulate, right? So it's really not just substantial, it's substantial offsite impacts. I think that's important. And so no court that I'm aware of has interpreted the meaning of substantial offsite impacts. So without that judicial interpretation, the department relies on generally the plain meaning of those terms. And in legal world, that's what we would do. So first, offsite. To me, that means, and this is again my opinion, offsite means things happening, regulating those things that impact outside of the property lines or impacting outside the property lines of the agritourism activity. All right, so I think that's important. And then the legislature added the modifier of substantial. And what does that mean? Well, I can't tell. I can tell you. We can all look at the dictionary definition of what it means, which is what lawyers and judges would do generally, and look at the context. But I will tell you, there has been a generally accepted premise around the state that means local governments can regulate a few things, and everybody does it a little bit differently. But I'll explain what I've seen. That generally means light, noise, and some combination or limitation of parking and or traffic issues. I'm careful with parking, and the conversations I had with the town staff was careful with that because the parking on property versus parking off the property or in the common areas around the roadways, right of ways, things like that. That's two different things. And again, that's where you want to be careful talking about the off-site impacts. But those are the general categories where we've seen, and I've seen it in a couple ways. The majority have fallen where they look at that and in an effort to not treat agritourism activities any different, if the local government has existing ordinances relating to events where they say, music has to be off at X hours at night, and every light has to be off by so many hours later, or things like that, and they apply that. That's how they would apply those same provisions to agritourism operations. In that instance, to me, that makes a lot of sense, because then agritourism operations are not being treated any different than other existing event type situations. And so I've seen a lot of local governments doing that. In some cases, I have seen local governments write specific where they provide different allowances. And I think we would have to be careful about the local government's not wanting to be arbitrary or capricious as to why they're making those decisions and treating agritourism better or worse, depending on your view of you being impacted by that as well. So I think that's why a lot have defaulted to those. So to answer your question more succinctly, substantial generally means more than normal, right? In context, but it's also those offsite. And so I think that's why you've seen a lot of governments, instead of trying to come up with something new, they've looked to their existing code and say, okay, well, we're going to say these are the offsite impacts we're regulating, and we're going to take our existing code and apply it to that as well.
So let me see if I get this right. Let's assume for a second that we're going to measure traffic. Let's assume for a second that traffic on Okeechobee is 50 cars per hour. How would we quantify the substantial on that particular number? Is it 80? Is it 90? Is it 120? So that's, I think, what this committee was set out to define. That and only that, as far as I understand it. When they approached me to sit on this committee, they said we need to quantify the substantial part. So that's where I'm trying to. I'm a firm believer that the agritourism law is extremely clear, extremely fair, and extremely doing its job as it stands. Now, in here, they're asking us to quantify substantial. So that's where I'm trying to, and I went through the internet, the state of Florida, using the word substantial in many different areas, construction, whatever, but I'm not a judge either. So I need to get some kind of guidance as to what would substantial be in the particular case of traffic, which appears to be the biggest problem that we've had so far. Am I correct? Can you help us with that?
So I don't have an answer, and what I shared with the staff, well, I do have an answer, but I can't tell you a number, right? What I shared with the staff was, it's one of those situations where two could be approached a couple of different ways. An agritourism activity has its normal ebbs and flows, just like any other entity does, right? And if they have sufficient parking on site for their average day traffic, and they invite those people and they have that situation set up, and on a normal day for that agritourism activity, they're able to handle the parking. But there's some overflow on a really especially busy day, or the main harvest festival or what have you, if you take that as an example. And then there's overflow parking, and the property appraiser does not, or excuse me, the property owner does not provide for that. Is that a substantial impact if it's limited in time and scope, such that it needs to be, that you need to have a code specifically that addresses that? That's really a local policy decision that needs to be made. Or is it a situation where there are already local codes in place? And I understand we had a long conversation with town staff and attorney about, the right of ways and the town and the road width not being very wide and not being set up for parking on the sides of the roads, and the dangers that can come with that, and the engineering damage that could come from those kind of things. And I was like, well, then do you already have those kind of things in place that prohibit parking on those roads, on the side of the roads, and then that you don't necessarily need to come up with what substantial impacts if you already have an ordinance that says you can't park on the side of the road? And so it's one of those deals where it's going to apply situationally. And is it then therefore the agritourism operator's problem if occasionally, or in a limited situation, people that park at their or come to their event or to their activity breaks another ordinance? with somebody going to a grocery store that parked on the right of way, would the store be held accountable for somebody's bad actor doing that? And so if the town's not going to do that, they're going to cite the driver instead of citing the business owner. Should that be something that they would want to have a separate set of regulations that apply to the agritourism operator? And are they treating them differently? And those are the conversations I had with the staff about really looking at the ordinances they already have in place as a way. And if they are not in place, maybe that is something they needed to address, across the local government versus highlighting things specifically for agritourism issues.
Thank you. That answer your question?
I just wanted to tell you, Simon brought up a question to me about why the, special events, section of the code is in there. It's only in there as an example because we talked about it at the last meeting about referencing back and forth. So that's, it's just put in there to show how we reference in there back and forth.
Where is that, Betsy?
It's in your agenda.
Yeah, but what Mr. Hall's saying is that, well,
Mhm.
so, I mean, do we have the special events list of rules and regulations?
Yes, I put it in there for you.
Where's that one?
It's in this agenda. The one that's in your right hand. And it's right behind Mr. Hall's FAQs. It's section 80
Yep.
of our code.
Yep.
And nobody is suggesting that those rules would apply to agritourism. I just want to clarify that.
Okay.
It's just an example of how our code does some definitions and how we reference to other sections of our code. And I only put it in there because it was talked about at the first meeting. Not because we're trying to equate the two.
All right, so I mean,
Mm-hmm.
all right, so then how are we gonna proceed then? If, he's saying we should look at this and no? Well, I mean, he was saying to reference it. for
Yeah,
current-
that's what I understood. The ordinance, the general ordinance that are in place, maybe that's not the special events, but
Oh, just general. So do we have general ordinances too that don't apply, that are just generally here?
We do, and they're
Okay.
all through our code. We have a noise ordinance
And what is that?
and it is essentially 50 decibels after, I think, 10 PM measured from the property line. And it's 55 decibels during the day measured from the property line. Unfortunately, our noise ordinance, if you look at 50 decibels, that's nothing.
Right. And that's why I was trying to
Uh-huh.
say to you earlier that I
Mhm.
get 50 decibels across my property all
Mhm.
day, every day,
Mhm.
from multiple types of things.
I mean, they have, it's this racetrack out here.
Mhm.
I mean, I hear that. And I guess maybe that's commercial, so I don't know if you handle that differently. I don't think that should be the case, but
No.
I can hear this racetrack at my
Mhm.
property and, so, and I smell horse manure all day long. And I bet, but
It is what it is.
Yeah.
And that's why I was trying to get you guys to define what the zoning was of the town, so everybody understands where they live. I mean, we're not living in the PUD, we're not living in the commercial, we're not living in wherever. It's
Mhm.
not downtown. We're out here in Loxahatchee, and I've been saying this since day one. So the folks that live here have to understand that they moved to the zoning of where we're supposed to be. So if we're going to try to push us out of the zoning where we're supposed to be, where are we going?
I don't think
Do the job.
anybody's trying to push you out.
Well, I mean, we're going to
whatsoever.
restrict and try to squelch and complain and complain and complain until you guys start jumping on me and it's just nonstop. And then I have to come in here and do this over and over and over again. It's ridiculous.
what about as opposed to this ordinance and what about, and he even said substantial is situational and what might be substantial for one location is substantial is different for another location. What about finding resources, city or state resources that can help solve situational issues? So like assigning, like an actual committee that goes and even maybe funds available to help resolve these issues, because I would think that this city wants agritourism. I mean, I'm not even speaking for myself, you know, I mean, we're not really big in this field, but I mean, this is all about food and promoting, you know, small farms, and there's just a million wonderful things associated with that. And I would think that Loxahatchee Groves would want to be, you know, on the forefront of, you know, small farms and healthy food and these type of things associated with agritourism. So what about, instead of trying to come up with ordinances, you know, actually assigning a committee and having funds to back it to help resolve, you know, these traffic issues perhaps, you know, or whatever the situation might be. Because you can't paint with a broad brush,
It's
you
true.
know, an ordinance to resolve problems with his situation and our situation and Joseph or whoever we have, you know.
I mean, that's what I was, in the beginning of this whole process, I said that when Francine reached out to us to mitigate the queuing on the street, we did it. It's done. It's over.
Mhm.
As far as you're concerned, and the code
Yeah.
enforcement, Andrew, he's
Mhm.
satisfied.
Yeah.
Close the case. It's done. It's over. So when
Yes.
someone's going to complain about the traffic, say, well, they've resolved the queuing. There is no safety issue.
None.
You can't complain. Go home. That's it.
Right, and that's what I think, okay, so if you
Yeah.
don't mind,
Okay.
that's what we wish, and I had a conversation with Simon this week or last week, which I don't know if you mind if I share that, Simon, but what we want to be able to do is exactly what you said.
Mhm.
You and Jody came in,
Yep.
you showed us the way you were going to change your on-site circulation.
Mhm.
I can use Joseph Chalmers. He came in, he told us what he was going to do. Anytime anybody's going to say somebody's building, they don't have a permit, we say, no, they're agritourism. No, they're bona fide ag.
Mhm.
We don't have any problem with that.
Okay.
Somebody comes in and says, the trees are coming down, and we say, no, they have an exemption, they're bona fide ag. I think what we're trying to do here is find a way, and this is what I was kind of trying to say to Simon. What you did with us lets us say, no, he's agritourism, and he came in and we worked out the problem. One of the things I suggested to Simon in just general conversation is if we can come up with a way,
Then
and
that
I
would be
mentioned
it.
it to Mr. Hall as well, if we could come up with a voluntary way,
Mhm.
you know, just like you
Yeah.
did, that somebody came in, and one of the things that Simon and I were talking about is there's an agricultural exemption for BTRs. There's like 5 or 6 different exemptions for BTRs. If you came in and just filled out an exemption for a BTR, when somebody complained,
Mhm.
we'd say, well, we've already talked to them.
I'm sorry, what's a BTR?
It's a business tax receipt. And, you know,
Are you suggesting that we come in and for every event? No.
I'm suggesting that, like, so for instance, let's use Swank Farms. And I'm making this up, I'm freelancing as we're talking,
Mhm.
a truly voluntary situation that you exempt yourself, because we're not going to define, you know, agritourism, because, you know, if we go into this, I think Stephen Hall can take us the rest of the way, not me.
Mhm.
If you fall into the agricultural exemption for a BTR, you just fill the exemption out with the information about what your business is. Somebody complains, we say, no, they're agritourism. We already know what they're doing, you know? Yeah,
For example, let's assume, I'm sorry. I don't know what your business is, but let's assume for a minute that you want to have in your farm, farm to table. A farm to table food trailer. Okay? In a commercial situation, as I understand it, you need a BTR. In our situation, you have the options, this is inside your property, to voluntarily say, this is what I'm doing. And that way, if somebody goes by your property, goes, hey, he's selling food. Well, he has an exemption for that BTR. That's what she's saying.
yeah, I'm going to give you a more detailed example. The conversation that we actually had is that Simon is a sheep farmer. and he's got a barn, and he's got caretakers quarters or grooms quarters, whatever you want to call them. He's thinking about bringing food trucks and a farmer's market onto his property. This is a hypothetical conversation. Technically, it's his determination that he's agritourism, not the town's. And that was based on discussing that with Mr. Hall. So we said, okay, the first time people drive by your property because you're on Okeechobee, somebody's going to say, oh, look at him, look what he's doing, and call us up. If he voluntarily filled out the BTR, we'd say, no, he's within his rights. He's agritourism. You know, I mean, that's the way we talked about it. Now, that is not doing a new ordinance per se. It's just like, partnering for balance, just like people who take trees down that have an exemption, just like people, that have a non-residential farm building, they have an exemption. How we document it, now that's a different story. I'll
do you-
take whatever recommendations you have.
Do you think that would have changed this situation? Because I sort of think that there was an issue or something, and that's why we're here. So if whoever had a BTR ahead of time, I don't think that would have changed this situation, why we're here now. And I don't even know who authored this ordinance, but it was too like, I don't know how you want to say, but when I read it, my impression was it was to further restrict agritourism.
Not the goal at all. It's really to try to balance your lifestyle with the other lifestyles that we have in town. I'm not going to take any editorial, or I'm not the writer of the document, but that was the intention of the document. And
Right.
I think that everybody's here so that we can craft a better document, whether that's referencing to existing ordinances that we have or coming up with a solution that just works for everybody.
But back to my original statement, if there was a BTR in place, then you think we wouldn't be here now?
No, I'm trying to come up with something for the rest of the people for the future as a
Okay.
result of the group, because, for instance, if there were traffic and it were situational, I think we would always try to reach out and say, hey, how can we help you? Or, is it true? We'd go look and see if it's true, because, not everything we're told is true.
Right.
Just want to say that.
Yeah.
We'd probably look at it. And I don't think that a voluntary BTR is going to change somebody complaining, but I think it's going to be like the tree exemption. And I always go back to the stuff I know people complain about all the time. When they call and complain about the tree exemption, I say, wait. They can, when they call because they see trees coming down, I can go, wait, they have an exemption, So.
Mm.
The other thing that we talked about with Mr. Hall, which is, I think, a tricky little thing that a lot of people don't think about, not 100% of every property that's bona fide ag, is bona fide ag. So you can have, 20 acres and 5 are bona fide ag and 15 are not. So there are a couple things, that, would be helpful if we knew to protect you from complaint. And that's it. I think it's really open communication that would work. I don't know how we cause the communication to happen. And I think that's what we're trying to solve. I think that's it. I mean, Stephen?
So my only caution is just to be careful with, and we talked about this as well, but just be careful with the fact that something really is voluntary.
Right.
Because if you're adopting ordinances saying you have to come get this permit so you can be or apply for this exemption, then the local government is adopting a procedure that
Mhm.
their agritourism doesn't have to go through, right? So it's just be careful and make sure it's very voluntary. How you deal with the neighbors and people calling and complaining about that is is kind of happens at every different kind of level of doing that. We deal with that at the state level. The department does not have the statutory authority or resources to, come in and make decisions. Is this agritourism or is it not? Basically, what you got is me and taking phone calls from constituents and local governments and staff and attorneys all over the state, and being helpful that way. And that's kind of what we're doing. We have a couple of folks in our team that do that as well. But I think what I would say as far as um, dealing with the neighbors and doing that is if that's something that works for your local community, great. And as long as your staff is in place, and everybody's trust works great. Now, what happens down the road when staff changes or anything else? Do you kind of get in the same situation? But there is no um, there is no government entity that has at least the state level, that has the ability to decide whether something is agritourism or not. And in the specific example about the 20 acres and the 15 and 5, um, I think in the law, it's very clear that and that's kind of where I started the conversation, that the preemption on local government regulation only applies to land classified as agricultural by the property appraiser and bona fide good faith agricultural activity. And if it's not classified as agricultural, then regulation can't happen. So I'd always encourage, our producers to be careful, one, about how they're getting their ag classifications for property, and then be mindful about where they're actually doing their operations on as well for that very purpose.
Madam Attorney, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions necessarily. I mean, do you have any questions of me? I guess it's opening myself up, the lion's den, but,
So if I understand correctly, the initial request of this committee to be formed to quantify substantial is null and void. That's one. Two, if we don't, and I suggest that anybody who wants to go into agritourism to first contact the obviously the association, which is a great association, the Agri-Tourism Association, which is this doesn't have anything to do with the state. They lobby a lot, they do a great job, and get a lot of information on that. That's how we start farmers into the agritourism. As far as having a zoning for agritourism, I think that's total overreach of the town. That should have never been there. That should have never happened. And that's my personal opinion.
One of the things that Mr. Hall suggested, though, is that if we have, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if we have townwide rules, then we need to look at how those townwide rules are implemented. And I think it is situational, and it does have to do with the streets that are involved. Some streets are wider than others. Some activities generate more activity than others. I liked what Simon said about trying to figure out some percentage, but the problem is that we'd never really get there. Because, the traffic on Okeechobee is actually really kind of high, believe it or not. 14,000 at certain,
Be hired.
yeah, at certain intersections. I went and I looked after that call.
And B
yeah.
Road as well.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
let me just be clear. So I think it was more of this. So the first statute is a may, right? The local governments may regulate this offset, not a shall. So I was just suggesting that if the local government decides that it needs regulations for these substantial offsite impacts, some have done not, and they've just simply said agritourism will be substantial offsets or substantial offsite impacts of agritourism shall be dealt, with in accordance with our special event venues and shall apply or whatever. and they identify the whichever ones. And some have just said we're just going to deal with it under these other ones, and they deal with, they just adopt a policy in their codes team, and they just apply it that way. But if you're going to, I was just saying that for the sake of the agritourism operators, and so that they're very clear and know what they're dealing with, that if you already have one, that is a path that a lot of local governments have chosen to go down, is by picking up what is already being applied in other situations.
If I may ask a question, Francine, and Mr. Hall, you're not familiar with this area, but Okeechobee is in a 3 mile stretch. There might be, and I might be short, 15 churches. How do we deal with the substantial impact of those churches in the town roads?
Well, actually, when they have the, let's say the, food pantry, we call PBSO to try to do some, management of traffic. Hasn't really worked that well. And additionally, when they come in for site plans, we talk to them about, and we've only had one come in at any time recently on Okeechobee. We talk to them about how they need to do a better job of on-site circulation.
At whose cost?
Would be at the church's cost, the on-site circulation.
And that officer?
The officer we've called, they haven't paid. However, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I wouldn't
Mhm.
understand why that same mentality wouldn't be applied to an event.
So interestingly enough that you mentioned that, we have a situation where there's a property on Okeechobee and they do not have the necessary access to their property. And so we have talked to them about getting a right-of-way permit from the county, because it's not our road. And Okeechobee is not the town's road. And so the county has said, right on point to what you're saying, that the only way that they can have access is if they pay for PBSO to do the MOT, to do the management of traffic. So there's already, there's two different ways. There's one with the food pantry where we just call them and it's part of our general. Yeah, and they don't necessarily get the cars off the road real quick, that. We also have school traffic in the morning. That's again, another situation that we can't really do that much about. But on the other hand, the county, like I said, is going to enforce management of traffic for one of the properties that creates a queue on Okeechobee.
So the question again is,
Yeah.
do we have a number to identify that substantial impact of traffic in those businesses?
One of the things we said to Mr. Hall right in the beginning of time was that the county has a threshold at which point you need to have traffic concurrency. And if you don't meet that threshold, you don't have to do a traffic study. That number is relatively low. And I had said to him that if we knew we had a county number, that triggered a traffic study, we could kind of use that. That number is low. Yes, ma'am.
When town of Wellington's going to do the Christmas parade,
Mhm.
for a week or two, they're advertising it on their flashing lights so that
Mhm.
people will know that Forest Hill will be closed or traffic is going to be heavy. What if something like that, where we put signs up on days,
Beautiful.
and then that way
Mhm.
people can prepare, I'm not
Yeah.
going to go to Publix between 10 and 12 at such and such time or something. And
Yes, we can
maybe
do
that
that.
could be a solution for.
It is a solution. We have to fix our sign code anyway. It's also like special events. Those are temporary signs. So that is a perfect solution. By the way, the thing with the Wellington closing the parade, they're a sponsor of the parade, but we could certainly come up with something. Yeah. Mhm.
Kind of saying maybe
Yeah.
we know that we're gonna have a farm to table event.
Yeah.
Obviously, you talk to your neighbors, but
Right.
maybe for other people that you're not familiar with, hey.
Yeah.
do Something
You,
such day.
you can do that. And in fact, that's another reason why I put special events in there, because you can ask to get a road closed for a special event. So, and you can also make arrangements for off-site parking. There's all kinds of stuff in there. You don't have to. So when we talked to Mr. Hall, he said if we already had things we did elsewhere, we could apply those things to other activities. I don't want to just assume everybody will understand that those would apply. I think that would be something we would look to this group to kind of decide. How do those apply to agritourism? But the sign, definitely a solution.
Yeah, I just kind of go back a bit to, a champion from the, town perhaps that, when we have, a situation that is difficult, and you have a problem with neighbors, I think that's the only time, that we need, or you guys want like an ordinance to address those situations, is that you have a champion that then decides which situations perhaps require an officer, or require signage, and then implement, these different steps just to resolve and make both parties happy on a situation, or situational, not an ordinance. I mean, I'm just saying, I think we all kind of agree this is not the answer. And I think even defining substantial is impossible for different situations. So it just seems like maybe instead of us doing what we're asked, we actually come up with a proposal back to say, this is what we think. And, I don't know, maybe that's not realistic. There's no budget for that. Maybe you have a counter suggestion as to how we address, the situation, on a case by case basis.
Well, I'm going to turn that over to our attorney because if you like, and I'm not trying to bounce it around, I
Yeah,
hear
yeah.
what you're saying. I actually like BMPs because that means everybody is playing by their own rules. But the problem that we have is when somebody isn't playing by your rules, you can't even help us get them to play by the right rules. So we need to be able to have some measure to enforce, or to cause everybody to be a good actor. So I think whatever you recommend, our attorney can probably translate into whatever we need to get into the code. I don't know if what I'm saying is coming across to you. BMPs are the best thing because it's self-regulating, but they're unenforceable by the town unless we put some regulation in place that lets us enforce.
Yeah, but I don't think you guys should have the mentality that you want to enforce anything, in a sense. Like, I think you want to resolve,
Yes,
not
yeah,
enforce or
right,
penalize, because
yeah,
I think you want agritourism. I
We
think you
do.
want to know that Loxahatchee
do.
Groves, is known for that,
yes, absolutely.
right? So
Yeah.
I don't think we want that.
We don't.
Yeah.
We want compliance. So, any example that I can give is a good story about compliance. There's another operator, not at the table here, but that heard through some conversation with a council person that they should come on in and talk to us about what they do on their property so we could help make sure that they're in compliance, you know? And they came in, they were really super, they've been doing it for like, I don't know, 20, 30 years. Nobody's ever complained or anything, but in the spirit of compliance and following the same rules that everybody else is, they just came in Again, like Joseph Chalmers, hey, I got this really cool thing. He just came in. When we called you, you just came in. Simon called me the other day. I'm thinking about this and that. So like I said, if people want to call, we're always here to go ahead and help you fit in, you know? But I have to, I mean, that's me. I think one of you said, if somebody else leaves, if somebody leaves, you know, what's the next person gonna do? I don't know. And I think that's why you want to have something consistent. Ruth, this is where you get to,
Well, I think, I think the question that posed to me is, if there is something that the committee has a consensus about, that it would like to recommend to the town council, like, let's just take signage, for example. So I was just looking at your committee task. I think we can put that in that framework, because one of the tasks was looking at ways to mitigate substantial offsite impacts. That's wide open, it doesn't, you're not graded on anything that you come up with. It's just, you're the people with the knowledge, and, to kind of look at what might work. You know, probably parking and traffic is probably the biggest issue. And if there's a way to have signage during event time, great. That's a way to mitigate it, right? It's a way to mitigate that offsite impact. Maybe the signage ought to be, maybe it ought to be this, all the signs ought to look the same. Maybe it ought to have Loxhatchee Grove's emblem on it. Maybe it ought to say agritourism event. Maybe, whatever the case may be. Maybe there ought to have a green border around it. I don't know. But just those are just some examples of ways that a recommendation could come out of this committee, completely fit under what you're tasked to do.
I think you hit the nail on the spot, the consensus. Up to now, the consensus is that we don't need this. State law already protects us. State law already has the experience and the parameters on place. Now, when it comes to the traffic, they have it in place. You guys can enforce if let's say an operator is parking 100 cars in Okeechobee, then the town can send the Palm Beach County Sheriff, and they can ticket all those cars. That operator next time is going to lose business or is going to correct the situation. We don't need any more laws. We don't need any more ordinances. We need less, because all of that brings cost of attorneys, cost of staff, unnecessary cost on the already taxpayers. So that is the only consensus that I can come out of here with. I don't know if we have a consensus on that. If you guys want to take it to a vote, let's take it to a vote.
Well, and can I just add something to that? I mean, if the committee thought that that's the approach that should be taken, I mean, that in and of itself could be a form of mitigation, right? So just so you know.
Okay, and as far as the signage, which is a great idea, we already have that in place. If you go by Okeechobee and there's going to be a pumpkin patch, the church, and I forget the name of it, which they do a great job, they have a huge sign that says pumpkin patch. If they're going to have a revival or whatever, they'll have a big sign. It's not a permanent sign, it's a banner, and they take it off and they take it on. So I think that we already have all of these ordinances in place to do the job. So having said that, do we want to take it to a vote?
Does that mean we're gonna still spend time to, no, you're just saying we're done. No, I think that, like the attorney just mentioned, that and I'm not suggesting any ordinance or laws, but anything that we can suggest to resolve, issues like I think I don't know whether the town buys signs and gives them to you and you put them out. I don't know. I feel like maybe we could come up with some ideas to suggest back rather than be just like, no, we're done. We're not going to do anything. And then,
Well-
they, then we're back to square one. And then there's going to be people that are going to want to
Right.
push the
Right.
ordinance. So I
So-
think it's worthwhile to,
Of course. And then we're right back to the best manager practices. We're right back to that. And
Well-
that's where we were to begin with.
Don't forget.
That's fine, but at least we have something. And we've been talking about this since we started this. Okay. And Francine wants it. Well, Ruth, maybe not so much, but I think she could work with it.
Listen, I think BMPs are great.
No, I know that.
There's just,
I'm-
I think they're great. It's just a matter of, if you adopt BMPs on agritourism operators,
Okay.
it's
well,
if it's a regulatory thing, and we can't do that.
Well, real quick, one of the reasons why I wanted to invite Ms. Harris to join us is it's my understanding that the state association may be interested in looking at doing BMPs. It's my appreciation that we might have started a conversation that other people are having, but that there isn't, a set of BMPs to look to. So, there's nothing wrong with having BMPs. We do a lot of our livestock regulation based on those BMPs. I'm not saying that we write code enforcement on it. I mean, we generally try to keep people, within the standards, set forth by the state's best management practices. So I wanted to make sure that we had the conversation of the best way to come up with the best management practices, even if we can't build regulations around them. So I don't know, Ms. Harris, if you want to talk about that at all?
Excuse me. Yes, thank you for inviting me. I'm actually Sarah Harris. I can't
Oh, I'm
change.
so sorry.
It's okay. My name, I can't figure out how to change it, so I apologize.
Oh, no, it's my bad, my bad.
Well, my name's wrong.
It
But
does say
we,
Alice on
it
the, on
says
the, on
Alice.
the screen.
Whenever I get invites through the Gmail account, it puts my mom's name up, and I haven't figured out
Oh,
how to fix
okay,
it.
okay. Well, hi, Sarah. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. So we have been approached regarding BMPs, and we are currently working on more of a document of how to be a good neighbor. And a lot of the suggestions that I've heard are in there. Do you have a way to handle traffic? Do you have, where are you going to park people? Noise, any impacts that are greater than any of your normal farm operation? Because farms, we have the right to farm, and any impacts that to neighbors offsite that might be greater than what your farm normally produces. So we've focused on light, noise, traffic, and parking. BMPs require regulatory, and honestly, when we started getting to the nuts and bolts of putting BMPs together, our operators do so many different things. There isn't what's good for someone who has 30 acres, 40 acres, and can easily handle traffic, easily handle the parking, is going to be different than someone who has 4 or 5 acres who's just doing blueberries and may only have a couple cars at a time. So that's how the association's approaching it right now.
So I think that Simon actually passed something out here from University of Florida. And I have referenced a number of things from University of Florida, and even as far back as 2016, the whole basis of it is being a good neighbor. So I do think that if there's some way we can have, some type of linkage to our existing ordinances on being a good neighbor. Like, for instance, we have parking ordinances already. We have parking and loading. We have that already. We have some bits and pieces of traffic, but we don't really have the kind of traffic enforcement that we need. I do think that, so for events, but not for farms, for events, we do have size. So you bring up a good point. You know, a smaller farm can't handle the same event a larger farm can. So the question I would ask is, do we hold off until you get your BMPs? Or do we try to track with you? And is there any benefit of our group perhaps participating in any conversation with you?
That's a good question. I can certainly bring it to our board. I know Darren's a member of our association as
Mhm.
well. Yes.
Because the big questions come up about food truck, farm to table, um, farmers markets by folks that aren't actually growing anything on their farm. You know, these are all things that everyone loves, but the question is, you know, what do we need to do to regulate the offsite impacts? And from my point of view, like I said before, I want to be able to say, no, they filled out the exemption, they're good. No, they told us what they're doing, they're good. I just want to be able to say that. I don't want to actually do any kind of enforcement. I want to say, no, they're good. So
Right.
that's kind of the issue.
Right. And as Stephen has pointed out, you already have ways to address offsite impacts. Now, some counties don't have ordinances; they don't have sound ordinances, so everyone's different. But you already have several in place. It sounds like so. That's how you handle it.
May I have, and you guys are not a member association. So when you become a member association and you buy your signs that let the public, general public, no, including one for liability. And I seriously recommend that you join the association. It's not a lot of money. And but that in itself should be, once you post that on your property and you're a member of the association, that in itself should be a direct sign that you are an agritourism operator. So whoever goes by and sees that sign, if they're going to complain, they're going to complain. But there's already systems in place to identify agritourism operators. You have it, I have it. Everybody that I know has it. So I think that to go and do something else is redundancy.
Yeah, and instead of best management practices, I mean, I was kind of referring to I don't know if it's rules of engagement but like what the town, steps the town can take. It was an officer, it was hours of the event. It's what the signage that you just suggested, in the event there is an issue, steps that can be taken. I don't really want to, I don't want to, I'm afraid like some of the BMPs might turn into, regulation or whatever quickly, and that's not.
Turn into rules of engagement.
Yeah, well,
Suggestions?
yeah, it is. It's suggestions, but I'm saying that I don't know what it turns into. Yeah, so I'm not really suggesting that. I was suggesting ways to resolve, an issue that happens. And that's why I was saying, the town, what does the town do? And how do we resolve it? And that's what I'm suggesting, proposing. And you just made another suggestion, as the extra signage. I know the list is short, but I mean, we're just now talking about this. If we could come up, maybe focus on that, that puts.
I think that, and I'm very happy that you're here. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a quorum. But part of this committee should be composed of people that are familiar with agritourism, because then they'll throw things that you're not familiar with, and it's unfair to you and to everybody that is going to get into that business. So I think that once you look, this gentleman is the Bible for the state that rules agritourism. It doesn't get any higher than him. She is the Bible for our association, which is people like us. And the state protects us against, and that's why these rules were set, to protect us from different governments, local governments, to try to regulate our businesses of agritourism. So this is why I said, and I propose that, we're doing here nothing. There's already laws in place. There's already plenty, even the town.
I get it. I'm smaller is better. I get that. But I also understand that there's people, and I don't know how many people have complained. I mean, do you have a number of how many residents have complained about agritourism? Is it only, I hate to point you out, but is it only? for-
No. No, the other lady who came in because there had been complaints about noise.
But it's only one particular farm that's received complaints.
Oh, no, it's a different,
Two people have,
two that have been with me. Two with me.
which I
Um,
don't think is a huge amount, but I have 4 young children and I know squeaky wheel gets the oil and I know you just want to like stop it. I get it. So I understand where we're coming from, but I also understand where you're coming from because you're stuck in the middle. So I think what you're trying to say is that maybe if we come up with something, it doesn't seem like there's animosity, like we're not trying to be difficult, but we're also giving you something to where.
Yeah, we don't want to be back here. I mean, he can speak to it. I've heard him comment that this is not the first time so if we do nothing, which I agree, I don't want any more regulation or I don't want an ordinance, but I'm just suggesting, coming up with something that
What if it's
it prevents us from being back here
What if
again.
it's they're members of the Agri-Tourism Association of Florida, they're following the rules, we're good.
That's exactly what I just said. There's a protocol already in place.
Certificate, that,
The-
whatever. we
Okay.
need, if she gets a complaint, phone and say, "You know what?
I'm
If I
okay
was
with that.
That's a great idea.
Florida Agri-"
And you have to have that sign.
and then you are out of it. We are still protected to do what we are legally allowed to do in the state of Florida. And no additional ordinances, regulations, anything need to happen at this level because we will follow what they're recommending.
I knew a woman was going to resolve this.
Amen.
I'm actually okay with that. I mean, the issue for us becomes all, yeah, right. Go ahead.
Do we have any public comments?
Got to get Ruth on that.
Do we have any public comments? Mr. Vice Mayor has a public comment.
Sorry, you don't have a microphone.
I don't have a mic. Here.
All right, Robert Shore,
Said that every time.
E Road. Also a member of the Agri-Tourism Association and the Florida Farm Bureau and all that fun stuff. But there is nobody trying to regulate what people do on their property. That is your right in agritourism. You have zero right to impact your neighbor, period. You have no right to spill your noise, light, smoke, dust, cars onto your neighbor's property and affect them. Right to farm. If your farming operation's been in operation for a year and it's a noisy operation, a dusty operation, you get that right by the state to spill over onto your neighbors. There's nothing they can, nothing they can do. That's right to farm. Agritourism, you have protection within your bona fide agricultural property. You don't have the right to affect your neighbors, period. Substantial, there's an ordinance. There's an ordinance for sound, right? If that's not a good level, talk about it and determine a good level. But in the end, we have ordinances and those ordinances apply to you as agritourism, to me as somebody that has a party at my house. It's the same ordinance that applies to everybody. It's not picking on agritourism. This ordinance was recognizing agritourism as a use in our community. And coming out of the box, it had a lot of stuff that shouldn't have been in there. And thank you, everybody, for getting together and recognizing that, because I didn't recognize it at first. The cost impact to the agritourism people, and that's not the goal. The goal was recognize it, acknowledge it, and at the same time reference the ordinances that everybody has to follow. Light, sound, offsite impacts, traffic. Do we have the ability to send a sheriff because you're stacked up in the road and write tickets? I don't even know if we have that ability or not. But I think that was the goal was look at the ordinance and say, is this reasonable? Is the sound level reasonable? There and said, hey, I'm about 50 dB with my neighbor with a chainsaw. Well, maybe that's not a reasonable level, 50. My understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of these ordinances were spillover
Yes.
from the county previous ordinances when we became a town. So maybe they're not realistic in a rural environment with tractors and chainsaws and that kind of stuff. So
They're not.
if it's possible, for the committee to look at those and say, these are too low for our everyday thing. The council tasks you as agritourism operators to recognize your agritourism operation and how does it affect offsite, and help us understand that my events create more than 55 dB. Every event does, but it's a wedding, it's a party. And, we think 70 is more realistic, because in the end, this isn't an agritourism rule for light and sound. This is a rule for everybody. And if the level right now that's on there is not reasonable, it's way too low, then that's something that we need to address. But, if you want to sunset and say, hey, screw you guys, we're just going to do whatever we're allowed to do on our property, and we're not going to give you any feedback on what we think are reasonable numbers to quantify offsite impacts, then that's your choice. But those ordinances for sound and noise that are there right now, the way they're written today, they apply to you as agritourism, me as a homeowner, they apply to everybody. And there's code enforcement. That's how it enforces ordinances. It's across the board. Ultimately, the magistrate is the mediator that you're talking about, Mr. Holman. Is there somebody that says, hey, is this fair? Is this not fair? But, it should never get to that level. The goal is that we do have the ordinances and that people understand when they set up their events, their venues, whatever they're going to do, that they understand the ordinance. And if the ordinance is not reasonable, then now's the time to pick it apart and try to make it more reasonable for what you foresee the future on your venues and your friends' venues. Because there's a lot coming to our town. As we recognize that there's a lot of agritourism coming to our town. It's going to come hard and fast. And we're not here to stop it. We're just here to recognize it and allow it to coexist peacefully with the neighbors. The neighbors are going to have to understand what the limit is. If the limit ends up being 70 decibels and that neighbor feels that's too loud for them, too bad. That's the ordinance. So, oh yeah, you've always got that option. But, this isn't about controlling what you do in your property lines. This is about how does this affect the neighbors, and trying to, if it can't be quantified, it can't be quantified. I mean, it is what it is. But there are things that are quantifiable, and those are ordinances, and they are what they are at this point. If you don't want to change them, then that's what it is. But the whole agritourism ordinance, the big picture is recognizing it, embracing it, welcoming it, letting people read about it, letting them understand it, and trying to quantify. And those ordinances, like I say, they apply to everybody, not just agritourism. If there's an ordinance reference in the agritourism, it's the same reference in the event policy. It's the same reference in anything else that may be generating something that that ordinance would apply to. So I just want to, say this is outside your property that we're talking about. It's not inside your property. You have all the rights that the state's giving you inside your property. Enjoy them, embrace them, take advantage of them. But be cognizant of your neighbors and there's got to be a process for the town. It can't be, oh, my neighbor likes me, so I can do 150 decibels. And all of a sudden the neighbor changed, somebody else moves in and, hey, I've been doing,
Suggesting
yeah.
that we define these general ordinances for everyone? And
well,
that's why I
that
like
was,
to-
that was what the task was, like Simon said, to quantify how we affect outside of our property.
You gotta use the mic.
My
huh?
3 minutes is
hello?
up.
think your batteries are dead. Can I see that microphone, please?
Karaoke.
Can we have the
Sir,
dead
can I
mic
see
so
that
we can
microphone, please?
fix it?
Thank you so much.
Simon, before you go, I just want to point out something that the vice mayor said, because this is the kind of stuff that I think the Holmans are talking about. If I go look at special events, which we talked about last time, not trying to say that agritourism should be subject to special events, but special events has its own special sign code. Okay, our sign code for the agricultural residential is limited to 6 square feet sign. So that's a 2x3 sign, which means it's like a snipe sign. If we were actually trying to put out a sign that people would be able to read, it would have to be larger than that. That's why the special event signs are 24 square feet in sign area. That's bigger than what's in commercial, and it's bigger than what's in agricultural residential. And so if agritourism wants a sign, where am I looking? Am I gonna look in? a
You look in
special
the
event?
same place where the church looked, and it has a signage for a banner, and we're not talking about a special event. Now, let me answer Mr.
But that's not the right code, so it means we need to change the code, which. is
Then
what
you
the
take
vice
it to
mayor-
the ULDC and you put the same code for everybody. We don't have the authority here. We were not assigned here to make changes in the code. We were only requested to quantify substantial.
No, sir.
We already have in the code what to do in the case of traffic violations, what to do in the case of parking, what to do in the case of noise. If we are going to change all of that, you're going to change it for everybody equally.
Not
Just
necessarily.
like Mr. Shore said.
No, not everybody, not necessarily. The task was to change the code. Ordinances are the feeders of the code. So if it is better for agritourism, and I'm going to just carry off what you said, Ms. Holman, if you don't mind. If it's a better idea to have a 24 square foot sign that, is like the kind they bring in and put on wheels and it's got an electronic sign on it, that's not in our code anywhere. If that's something that works for agritourism, then we need to put that in our code. I'm not saying it does. I'm trying to give an example of if you want to make suggestions, Mr. Holman, to the council of what should be changed. I already heard you say, maybe we need to look at signage, right? Signage.
But not as an ordinance requiring.
Not as a requirement, it's an allowing you. It's not a requirement.
I was suggesting it as a tool that the
Yes.
town has
Yep.
to implement in the case of a situation.
Correct. So if you wanted a larger sign, because people can't look at a 2x3 and see what your event is, because you're going to want to have date, time, location, some reason for people to go. If you thought you needed a larger sign for,
So it would be written as.
it would be,
Use a sign. Versus you shall use.
correct. Means that you might have the ability to have more than somebody else, you know?
We already have that ordinance.
Correct. And you have it like the churches, then all those churches are in violation. I'm sure you've seen the church on E Road and they have a huge sign. It's like 4 foot by 4 foot, Easter is coming, whatever they might be. And they do fall perhaps under special events. Agritourism doesn't fall under special events. If I'm going to have to come up with a sign every time I have a wedding, then it's going to cost me money. So it's
I don't
not,
think that we have to
well,
have it.
but, okay, so you either choose one or the other, special events or agritourism. It's like agricultural code or regular building code. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hall. They already have the ordinances in place for all the signage.
The only thing I'd caution about signage is under 60450 Florida statutes, farm signs are exempt from local government regulation. So if you wanted to, if they want to suggest or require that, that could be something you had to work through that issue.
Well, I
But
think
just
that you're speaking about on-site signage as opposed to off-site signage. And what I'm saying is if an agritourism operation wanted to be able to have a sign at the foot of every one of our lettered roads off Southern Boulevard, and I know that those crossroads might not mean anything to you, those would be off-site signs. And so, I mean, I don't care how
so you're
we
talking
would
about like
write the
advertising
ordinance.
signs.
Yeah, you know, I mean,
So
I'd
are
be
you going to are you going to require them or just offer them as a something
offer,
that they could offer them, right?
offer, not require. I think that was the statement.
It was more if we wanted to.
Right,
Our
correct,
versus we have
correct. Oh, well,
Do you
that would
have
be your decision as well for duration, because right now, the duration for, and again, I'm only telling you from special events. I'm not trying to apply. I have to keep saying it because I don't want anybody to try to think I'm trying to apply that. But right now, there's a 14-day prior to the event time frame for that sign. And then you need to take it down within 3 days after the event. Now, there's a lot of stuff we have to do relative to our sign code. So if you wanted something preferential, you could ask council to consider it as the sign code is being rewritten.
I mean, using that as a tool to navigate is great. I think anything for navigation is good when it comes to these events. And if you have the opportunity to use it, then that's fine. But if it's not required, that satisfies Simon. He just doesn't want the required have to do it. And same with Marty. Mhm.
But if we were to set up a farmer's market.
Sure. Yeah,
advertise,
right. You have the 14, well, if we went by that, it would be 14 days before and 3 days after. And if you had it weekly though, then it would just be out there in eternity until you're over.
I don't know, because I don't want to freelance on rules. I gotta check with the attorney here on how we do it, because there's a lot of special rules on signs.
Hmm.
I was just throwing out an offer.
Right.
Right. So just realize, keep in the back of your mind, like you're here to make the recommendation to the town council. And then, by the time in between the time that, you make your recommendation to the town council and the town council ponders it a little bit. I mean, we're all going to have a chance to kind of think it through to determine whether or not that's workable under current ordinances, under current state law. So really, like, this is I look at this as like kind of a brainstorming opportunity. And then as far as signage goes, just think it through. I was thinking that the signage is more for the benefit of the neighbors and the people going through rather than your advertisement, because that puts it into a different category.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was to resolve it, but I think we automatically thought, oh, that'd be cool to have a big sign out in the corner of the. main
Well, it's a
road.
double
But yeah,
purpose.
yeah,
It's a double
the
purpose.
hours to let them know ahead of time.
Then it's your sign plus my sign plus his sign. It's not feasible. You see what I mean?
Well, that's why we would have to be able to say, okay, you can have one or you can have two, or whatever it is.
I believe that there's already laws in place in the town and ordinances to cover everything else without touching the agritourism or piercing that agritourism veil for the people to come. I'm only speaking for Joe Blow that tomorrow wants to grow oregano and put it in olive oil because he thinks he has the best oregano and olive oil in the world. For him to have a wide open road to success. No, I think that we are here spending the town's money unnecessarily. If somebody has, like I said earlier, 100 cars or 20 cars or whatever, and your neighbor is complaining, then let Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office resolve the issue and let those two people resolve the issue. And apparently we're not the only ones. That article that I passed out is from 2016, and this have been happening already for a long time. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not going to patch something that is human nature. So instead of wasting the taxpayers' money and the states, in this case, and my friend that probably wants to go home and have dinner, I think we're here wasting time. We couldn't quantify substantial. You and I are very familiar with these laws. Unfortunately, they're not. I highly recommend you look into them. It's going to help your business. It's going to open a lot of doors. And, having said that, we can make a motion to finish this right here. Because you come for the same thing over and over.
You have one of our town council right
Oh,
here.
I-
He's made the comment, you guys can't do whatever you want on your.
But
and
we're
that's
not
gonna
doing
affect
whatever we
somebody.
want.
I'm saying, so this is gonna come back.
It's, how can it come back when it's not our position? Any law here.
Because they can pass this ordinance. I mean, they were really close. So this is the state is gonna override that?
At the state overrides. That's why it's
Yeah.
unfair for you guys to sit here
Yeah.
on a committee that you don't know how it works. It's really unfair. And
We're aware of this. I mean, you keep saying that. We're aware of that, but if they're gonna pass this,
they can't, state supersedes it. State laws already exist to protect us. And they have the right to monitor off-site impact. Off-site impact. That's it. They can't come into your property and tell you you cannot have 100 cars. So once we're clear of that, we're wasting time here. Wasting
Okay,
my time, taxpayers' money, and really, I think this is,
So going back to what I suggested, where in the whatever rules they want to set up for under agritourism, the state code, blah, 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 blah. And
state law supersedes local.
right. Just like state law and have it listed. So if somebody calls and says, hey, the Holmans have this, well, by state law, they're allowed to do that.
That's the way they do it now.
And what we also said was, the certificate, we're members of such and such.
Once you become a member, yes, once you become a member of you can buy your signs, which one of them is needed for liability purposes to protect you. And you have your agritourism signs and that's precisely why they're the sign. And stay in touch with it, because now whatever little laws in certain, not that is in this town, whatever little laws are applying in other counties, I believe it's Bill 833 or I forget. Steve, help me out here. What's that bill come right now on the Senate, 833 or?
About the agritourism bill. Yeah, I'm not sure it's going anywhere this year. It's running out of time to move.
It's I have it here. I believe it's 833 and
it's something like that. And can I just step in here, just say this? So the town and their staff put a lot of effort into put this together and to work with this. And I would hate to see that. Let me just say this. I think there were some good suggestions tonight about the town has some ordinances in place that may be applicable to the offsite um, impacts. If this group looking at those, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but you can ask the staff, and I'm sure they would, to pull those together. If you guys look at those and say, hey, we want you to apply these other existing ordinances but we think some of these thresholds are out of step and out of date, and that you should, that may be a good use of this group's time to give feedback to the staff, so that the town doesn't just move forward with say, okay, we'll keep everything in place. Because what I'm hearing about a few minutes ago, I heard the conversation that it was at 50, and everybody in the room seemed to say 50 may be too low. Maybe we need to have a relook at that. So I don't know what the right number is, but if you give the staff some direction like that, or a recommendation, then the council can go forward with that. But at least I had an opportunity to give some input to them before they just move forward with whatever. And the state does not have, the town does not have the ability to send us, and I don't have the ability to tell them, no, you can't adopt it that way. You know, we can write letters and we can say, hey, this is what our opinion, this is what I think. But if town did adopt something that you guys didn't like, it may result in having to have a lawsuit to make sure they're overstepped. So given an opportunity to give feedback may not be a bad thing to do, especially if it sounds like the staff is and the attorneys are kind of where you want them to be. But if you want to look at the specifics of what those ordinances are and give your feedback on whether that you think those existing ordinances are in a good spot or not, or applicable, or should be increased or changed or decreased or whatever they are, it may be a good idea to do that.
Thank you, Steve. Unfortunately, this town has committees that deal with those ordinances. And they go broader. Then they'll do it commercial, residential, agricultural, and they'll do it on a broad base. What I'm saying is we don't have the authority. As a citizen, I can tell you that I don't have the authority. I'm a landowner. To do that. That's the point I'm trying to make. And they already have in place. Now, do they want to go ahead, the council? We're only a committee. Let's not forget this. And this is not my first committee. We can talk here until we're blue in the face. And when it goes before council, they can go, nah, we're going to do this. So having said that, and having had the experience that I've had with this town, we have already this agritourism thing. Somebody came up with the idea of let's regulate agritourism, and as they got into that bucket, they realized that the bucket is not a bucket; it's a well. So they got in deeper than what they could have. So I think that the best thing to do, and I can put a motion on the table and we vote on the motion to just finish this committee right here. The existing laws of the town apply for offsite impact, and our laws stay the same. We don't get affected. Nobody here is going to go and have a crack out of tomatoes or barbecue people. Stuff like that.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that the levels that they have currently are so low. So then you're going to be here every other week like I've been fighting it over. I've been doing this 10 years here, Simon. This isn't something new for me. Well, you're new into the agritourism game. I've been doing this shit a long time. Okay. And I've been here fighting this town for a decade. Okay. A decade I've been doing this with a whole different group of people. Okay. And that's what Marty's saying. Simon, in 10 years, these folks won't be here. Francine most likely won't be here. Ruth will probably be gone because she's tired of this nonsense. And then Robert back here, who knows where he'll be.
Alexia will still be here. She'll say, hey.
Margie
Decade ago.
Margie might be here because she was here 10 years ago. But Marge, she was here 10 years ago.
She was.
Yeah. I don't think she was on the council board. She was probably on a side person, but whatever. I don't want to have to
was here
come
like
back. That's
20
what I'm
years.
trying to get to, a point to where the town's satisfied. You are. Marty, me, whoever else is doing this. And then the neighbors can get mitigated through the town. Otherwise, I'm telling you, you're going to be here a decade from now when you're knee deep in it and you have somebody that you sold your side lot to that starts bitching and whining about what you're doing. And then you're going to be here doing this again with a whole different group of folks. I guarantee it. And that's what, Mr. Hall's talking about is try to, come to some sort of, agreement or something above and beyond what they have in place now, because what they have right now, you're going to be out of code, man. Well, they're not saying that we're going to authorize. No. Well, what's substantial? Right. I know. Fine.
Can I just jump in on that? Like, so talking about quantifying impacts, offsite or whatever, it doesn't always have to be numerical. You could, you guys are smart people, you know what's going on out there. It could be narrative. You could come up with, like, just say traffic, for example. What kind of traffic, that's being brought to Loxhatchee Groves by an event is too much for the neighbors. Well, you don't like 80 cars, 5 cars, 10 cars, who knows? But what could it be? Can you describe it? And that's okay too.
Okay, but here comes the other problem. I have 20 acres. My neighbors are mostly commercial. Well, it is what it is. But here is Joe with his oregano farm that has got 5 acres. That same measurement cannot apply to him or to me.
A narrative
That's
could,
precisely the
a
point I'm
narrative
trying to
could, a narrative could. Because, you guys,
make. Now with that.
well, think about it. So let's say, you go to a farm to table dinner, and it's, I don't mean to, okay. All right. Like,
They're gonna talk
and
about you
the
anyway.
traffic, it's become so popular. The traffic is backing everything up. So the people that actually live on that street can't even get home at night. All right. Or they can't get out at least for maybe 3 hours. Right. So that's something that you can describe. So whether it's a 2-acre property or a 200-acre property, it doesn't matter because it's the same thing. It all depends on, okay, what is, how many cars does it take to impact the neighbors? Maybe it's
so-
an hourly
That's
thing.
something-
Well, let me give you an example, okay?
What I'm saying.
A narrative example. What we're really all concerned about here is life, health, safety. And guess what? There is narrative from fire rescue or emergency response vehicles. So to me, the offsite impact, and I'm just throwing this out here, the offsite impact that we would be super concerned about would be that emergency vehicles couldn't get through. And now I'll give you the third example. Last winter, there was a big giant shindig off North Road near yours, but not yours. And we could not get emergency vehicles even to the location. And I know a witness that was there. They could not get to the location for an hour. No cars could move on North Road for an hour. So it is possible to define the offsite impact with a narrative that's about health, safety, welfare. The queuing can't be so much emergency vehicles can't get through. That's enough. I mean, I don't know, I'm not an attorney, but something like that.
Isn't that's
But
none of
normal?
that is specific to
It's not,
tourism.
Right.
So why
It's
are
not.
we? I mean, I'm
Nope.
with you. I'm still with you, but
No, we're all
like,
together.
we,
I don't.
we talked about it with Stephen, and what we came up with is we probably needed to do something townwide that said that there couldn't be queuing, anywhere that precluded, that type of traffic.
So
But
maybe-
then
maybe
you,
maybe our suggestion is, well, whatever we suggest that the study be done, or to determine what amount for any event. That's
Yeah.
I mean, that's so generic, but it's like we're suggesting that, the town perform the exercise and the analysis to determine, what quantity, or you guys have to
How
define
wide
it,
is the
like,
fire truck?
causes that, safety vehicle not to be able to access.
Do we still have PNC board and ULDC?
Not ULDC, that's part of
So we have
PNC.
PNC, planning and zoning board. So that's a job for them. How many people in that committee?
5.
5 people in that committee that are professionals in that area. I think, and I don't want to kick the can, that's not, I'm agreeing that the sound levels are low. I'm agreeing that, that there needs something to be done and the safety is our most important. I agree with all of that. Now, if you need to know how to grow tomatoes or grow radishes or raise sheep, we can tell you. We can tell you, but I can't tell you how many decibels it takes to, I don't even know if I said it right, to be non-aggressive or, so we don't have, and this is what I'm trying to say, and it's not fair for us to make a decision for the rest of the citizens and landowners of this town.
But by us suggesting what the action is still a methodology of us, rebuttaling to them, giving us this ordinance that put all the burden on us. It was like, we go do the study and we go, so maybe our reply back is that, the study needs to be done and it needs to be applied to everybody. I mean, because honestly, again, I mentioned the go-kart
Yeah.
place over here. I can go stand on the road and measure it. It's not even very expensive, to get a meter to measure that. And I'm sure that would be,
I think the town.
I can hear it loud and clear. And, I mean,
Hmm.
sometimes I love to be on my farm in the daytime, on the weekend, on a Saturday and, I mean, and so.
That's
So-
a whole
so the-
nother can of worms.
So, Mr. Holman, so with that example, I mean, what about that annoys you? If it was a 5-minute thing on a Saturday afternoon at 2, would it be a big deal? Or the fact that it's 4 or 5 hours on a,
Yeah,
I mean, those are kind of things.
honestly, I struggle with it because I think to myself, that's a place where kids get to go and, have fun. And I'm like, so I don't know. I don't even know if I would ever complain, about it because, and like I mentioned
You're a good
before,
neighbor.
I smell horse manure, but I love horse people. I'm not even a horse person, but I love seeing horses go down the road, and people just, riding around. I think that's cool, man. So it's, I don't know. Maybe, that's just a mentality and tolerance, but, yeah, I don't, that needs to be a study.
Well, it's not about, listen, what you guys decide, if anything, even if it's to disband, it doesn't matter. It's just a recommendation.
Yeah.
Because I think the council thought that, the local industry folks ought to give their thoughts and 2 cents on
Yeah.
what, how to maybe tweak this ordinance, or whatever it may be. I mean, it was just looking at industry guys, industry
The
people.
bucket in the well. Just the bucket in the
I don't get it.
I mean, that's all it was. It wasn't like whatever these guys decide, whatever everyone decide is going to be the law of the land.
It's fine, but there's so many entities within the town that are breaking all these rules too. And that's what I've been saying since day one to Francine, that Ruth, everybody's breaking the rules. It's town-wide. For every rule you guys have is being broken on a daily basis. Okay. But it was like just picking out us because somebody didn't like us. And that was it. So, but that's like I kept saying to Francine, but everybody else is breaking every rule the town has. So I don't get it. And everybody was like chasing after us that, everybody's creating all these ordinances against us. And it wasn't saying, hey, we're going to create it for the entire town and we're going after agritourism. That was it. And that's why I got offended.
And maybe that's what we come back to, is that, for each category that, we come up with a specific recommendation to what the town needs to go do to go update these regulations for everyone, because
And they should be loosened aggressively because no one's abiding by them to begin with. No one is. Ruth, no one's abiding by the rules here. Do you live here?
No.
Okay, exactly. If you came here and stayed here, I'm telling you, people are burning fires when they shouldn't be. People are airboating or boat fixing in their yard when they should. It's on and on and on. It's the gun shoots. It's the whole town. The town is based off of that, though. When I came here in '99, it was you don't talk about your neighbor, you don't squeal on your neighbor, and you love it, and you leave it alone. And that's what I'm all about it. And that's what this town was built on. And, I don't know if Robert Shore knows that, but that's what it's built on. And that's what it's always been. And then, then we have the new influx of the new folks because the land values have gone up. I've talked about this, the gentrification of the rural lifestyle, and all these new folks want to change it. And that's what I was against because it's the only place in the county that has this. It's a special spot and it should be respected. And that's why I was trying to quantify, what's the zoning, where you're living, and you have to know where you're moving to. And I don't think this town should be changed because the new folks come in here. Because once it's gone, it's never coming back. And as you make it more restrictive and this changes and changes and changes, it's going to be gone. And that's what's going to happen. And it shouldn't, though. And that's my point.
My butt is, that I worry at the appearance of if we just say we're disbanding, we don't need to change.
I'm not
You're
saying
saying
to,
that.
no.
yeah.
No, I'm down with doing the communication and getting to a point that we don't have to come back with what Marty's saying, because I'm all about that. Because I've been doing this, and that's what I told Francine. I was like, I'm all about, let's get through this and let's get to a point where we don't have to come back to this in a decade. And because I just don't want to, it's a waste of, like Simon's saying, it's a waste of time, money, and everything.
I put up, my vote was to be that I appreciate the opportunity for us to be here because I don't want other people making the rules for us. So I hear where you're coming from, 100%, but I also don't want other people that haven't been here, that don't know the history, that don't know anything about farming. We purchased the farm in 2013, but I've been going to our farm since 1974 because my parents bought it in the late 60s and then we purchased from them. So I remember when it was one lane that way, one lane this way on Southern Boulevard. There were no lights. And when we would drive home at night, I was scared because the pine trees looked like monster shadows on the road, and just, I don't want to.
Where's your farm? Is your farm on A Road? Do you own that avocado tree that's on the road that everybody likes to? I know where you are.
Probably be my.
Well, I used to own a farm 3 lots from that. So what I'm saying is you can sit here and think that you're going to make a difference. The fact of the matter is that when it leaves the stable, let's say that we go through whatever 10 meetings they want us to have. 10 meetings, the attorney's coming, 10 meetings with the time that you could be spending with your kid and he can have his food at home. Then it goes to the council, whatever council might be in March, after the election. And they can say, we'll table it. This is, we're not doing anything on it. So the only thing that stays true here is the fact that the state and the association, once you belong to the agritourism, if you qualify as an agritourism, which I think you do, it's the only protection we have. The rest of it comes and goes. Your Bill Roth, your state representative, those are the people that are going to make a difference for us. Not somebody on the ULDC that is going to say, oh, well, I think that his sheep are are buying too hard or whatever, or I think his barbecue is smelling too much. So this is the part that I want guys to realize. I don't have the time to come and waste. I'm 69 years old and I've seen this back and forth for years, just like you, for the same reason that you're here today. Because you shouldn't have been back here, or they shouldn't have messed with you all this time. But somebody, somewhere, decided to step into that bucket thinking that it was a bucket and it's a well. You can't prevent it.
But the real question, Simon, then don't participate. Like, you don't have to be here. And you're right. You're right that this supersedes whatever, this local law, but then let us like make proposes so that at least it's on record, and I agree, maybe it's futile, but we have the opportunity to do this. And if you don't want to waste your time, I get it. And I feel like it's a waste of my time to some degree, but
Okay, so it's either we vote
yeah,
or we don't vote.
there's people that aren't here, Joseph, and I'd rather vote, with them here personally. So that would be my suggestion. I mean, I don't even know where they stand, maybe they're with you or whatever, but I think we should wait for them.
This is not a me or you situation. Get it?
course
I
not.
understand it.
No,
I understand it. That's why I asked your wife to read the law from the state.
and this gentleman, Mr. Hall here is too, he's telling us to take this opportunity, so, and this is the dude you just said was king. So maybe we should. And again, I mean, like my first thing is I'm suggesting that they go and do the study, whatever, or maybe it's not a study, or they go do the work to define it for everybody. That way we're on record for saying everybody, it's for everybody. We're not doing an or we're suggesting we don't do an ordinance to put the burden on us.
Okay, so we can vote on that. But what I'm once we vote on that, we go a step ahead.
No, but we got to come up with it. I mean, that's very vague. I mean, we got to come up with what our recommendations are. No. I'm saying that they go determine it, but that's what our suggestion back to them is that they go determine what that right amount is. Go over here. The
Yes.
town needs to go over here and stand outside and determine, like, measure what's going on, because obviously it's okay now.
Right.
So, well, I mean, but then why are we being, why is this ordinance? That's why I don't even understand where it came from.
Just FYI, we don't advertise everybody's code enforcement situation. That property's in code enforcement. Now,
So that wouldn't be an example of where to.
no, it's a good example. It's a fantastic example because our noise ordinance was identified a while back as needing to have an update. You're recommending an update. It means that one of the recommendations to the council is to prioritize the noise ordinance.
Yeah.
I think I heard you all say that you want us to go back and narratively define traffic impact. I heard that as a recommendation. No, they are not. And this is the conversation that we had with Mr. Hall. Different roads have different capacities and they're in different conditions of deterioration or repair. Some roads are newly repaired, some are 100 years old. So yeah, the road condition and emergency, transport access. I mean, these are things we can narratively describe, and that's what you're asking us to do. And I think that we can do that. We were also asked to reference to other sections of the code. And I want to just remind you, section 65-030 is and it's in the bigger package from the first meeting, is what was added in to our existing code. And every one of those paragraphs generally references to either a state law or another section of our code, but it doesn't define in any narrative what applies and what doesn't apply best to agritourism. I threw out the sign code we don't have anything in here about the sign code, but likewise, our sign code doesn't allow in the AR district big signs unless you have a special event. So you want the same kind of sign coding or flexibility with sign code that a special event has? Those would be the kind of recommendations that I think, Ruth is suggesting, and I think, I don't want to put words in anybody on the screen's mouth, but now would be the time to ask for something you want. And I'm only using stuff we talked about. It doesn't mean added in. I also like the idea of a voluntary program where you take the exemption to the BTR, that, you have a piece of paper here that, no matter what, nobody can really complain about you because you're agritourism. Just like nobody can complain about Bonafide Ag taking down trees. As long as, I know about it, I defend you. And when I say I mean the town as a whole. Oh, we get calls all the time, and not about, let's say, agritourism, but about Bonafide Ag, either building or having activity on their property or taking trees down or trucks and vehicles that are not normally allowed. And we say, well, they're Bonafide Ag. We have to go research it if we don't have something on file. And then we go back and we say Bonafide Ag. When Simon came in and he said, what's the best way for me to do my Bonafide Ag? I said, you fill out this non-residential farm building form. That non-residential farm building form is under 604, the right to farm, and you don't have to fill it out. You just tell me, or whoever you talk to here, that you're operating under 604, and you sign that document. And whether you permit that building or not, we've got something in our file that we know nobody can complain or send us on a wild goose chase for code enforcement because you're exempt. So it saves taxpayers money. That's the only reason why we asked for that. But I'm with Mr. Hall. I don't want to do anything that smells like regulation. I want to offer the exemptions that already exist. So that's, I think, I think we like the idea of making recommendations on what needs to change or what you would want considered relative to making agritourism work better in the town. And while I see your point, Simon, please, now's the time and we can do it.
I'm gonna make a motion and when I make a motion, and the way you do it, you make motions and then, if it's voted, yes, then it goes back to town council, or I'll make a motion to take to council the, ask council for guidance and for change in the sound, traffic, and what's the other one? It was smell, but smell doesn't, no, signage has never been. Not correct.
Lighting.
There's lighting, you had said at the
Lighting,
last meeting.
Lighting,
Yeah.
lighting. So guidance on that, correction, and to take a second look on those items, and then come back to us with a recommendation. Isn't that what you want?
I wanted to,
For them to tell us.
yeah, but I would like to think about it a little more and maybe come up with some specifics and more than just that. I don't know yet. I mean, we're just getting warmed up here.
You just throw out some numbers. LDC 50-010 is north. LDC 50-025 is odors. LDC 50-020 is vibration.
There is one for lighting.
There is.
Those are
I
numbers.
think it's 10 o'clock at night.
Well, those are 4 ordinances that exist that are referenced in this area.
So if those are not enough, and you agree they're not enough, and you agree they're not enough, then have the council, because the council is the ultimate, come back to us with a suggestion.
The sign code is section 90.
But the signage, he just said it, with us, the signage, we're exempt
But that's on your property.
on the property. You're talking
Um,
about on the corners.
Yeah,
So how are you gonna resolve the issue where he wants to put him in the corner of B Road, his sign, I wanna put
I'm not
mine.
really worried about that. That's mechanics. I think the idea is to make the recommendation. And when we get the recommendation, we can figure out the mechanics if it's something important to you. And so I just wanted to throw out some other sections of the code that you might want to look at. So 90 is signs and 105 is the sight distance, which is sight triangle. So you don't want to block the sight triangle with any, signs that are off-site.
And let me ask you a question.
It's the corner. It's the corner. It's essentially the distance around the corners.
Oh, okay.
The person that owns that corner.
Right, exactly. The person who owns the corner, if you're in the right of way or an easement, you can't block the sight triangle. So, yeah. Right. Additionally, if you are going to be off-site, you're going to need somebody else's approval. I mean, there's a couple of little things like that. On the parking, it's Article 95. I just wanted, like you're saying, look at these other things. And we do have we have some items relative to roads and traffic, and unfortunately, I don't have them sitting right here in my hands, but
Francine, can you compile those and email them to us?
yeah, we sure
Okay.
can. The other thing is if you wanted any kind of exemptions in time, 170 is for special exceptions.
Isn't that midnight on Friday and Saturday night? And then 10 PM on weeknights, correct?
Correct, 10 PM.
Yeah, but still, I mean, they get the exception, so should we.
Yeah, if you want
Exactly.
an exception,
We
that's what I
should get that
was,
same right, that's,
Yeah.
okay.
Saying that we should get the same.
Of course, I mean, if they're getting till midnight, then we should get to midnight too.
well, that's what
On Friday and
Mr. Hall
Saturday
said.
night, 10 PM on weeknights is what it says.
That's one of the things that Mr. Hall said when we were talking about, if we had, and he said it earlier tonight, if we already have something that covers these same type of things and you want the same as they have, you should have it. So, yeah.
Okay, you agree with that? I agree with that.
So then look at section
Provided
80.
That it doesn't pierce our agritourism bail.
Right.
I mean, it's either gonna be that or less.
Look at section
Well,
80.
sure, and that's why I want the same. Because I think that's what we're
80-25,
after is having the
it's in your
same
agenda
for
package.
everybody. It's the same for everybody.
Yeah, we'll make you a list. I think we did get some pretty good coverage. We did reference the sections of our code in our first pass of the agritourism. Admittedly, not every code that pertains is referenced.
And
So,
I think the what was it, 55 at the line? That's not, that's way off.
oh, and that's
That's
during
got to
the
go
day.
way up. Yeah, exactly. But that needs to go way up because well, Ruth, it's way up. If you live out here, it's not 55. But I hear it all day. Like he's saying he hears it all day. I'm not sure you certainly do because you're on the main road, but it's all day from all kinds of activity. That I hear that too. And that's going over to the acreage. I hear that every morning about 6 a.m., 6:30. It's the dog barking from the acreage to my lot. And I'm a 40-acre away from that. I never complain because I don't care because it's love it and leave it alone. That's how it should be. Like how Marty is.
Okay, so I know that you wanted to go as long as we needed to go. We're at a little after 8 o'clock. Wednesday night seemed to be the night that was working. How soon did you want to meet to finish the conversation?
What was it, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
So 2 weeks is good if everybody's okay with that.
is 2 weeks good for you all? Okay,
And maybe Joseph will be back and we can
Yeah.
have 5 people here
Uh-huh.
to hopefully.
okay. Yeah.
Can adjourn, right? Is there anything else?
If you wish to, I don't know if you voted on Simon's motion.
A motion for them to give us that, but we have to vote on it. Everybody agrees with the 8
So, well, can you just say it one more time?
Are you crazy?
And I'm just gonna say no.
The motion is for the town, for the town council. Because it's the authority to, give us guidance on the levels of noise, traffic.
That's what Francine kind of just went through, didn't she? With these items on the code book already?
Code.
Okay. Oh, how much? Okay, that's fine. If they want to give us, okay, I'll agree to that. You're just
Can I-
asking for
can
guidance.
I add something in there? I mean, I would think that this committee is supposed to, give that recommendation or give the guidance to the town council.
Sure, that's what I keep saying.
Oh,
But
it-
she doesn't
it
care
doesn't
about
matter.
that.
It-
She just
it's-
wants us to give the guidance.
Well, like, because it's, you live here, you work here, like, what is it about noise that, where is that level from your standpoint? Not a number. You don't have to give a number, but what should it be? Is it a time span? Is it 10 o'clock at night, whatever it is?
See, I have a problem with a lot of things. Because you guys, meaning the attorneys and you give here a special event sheet that in one line item says, the signage. But on the other line item, it says that you cannot have any cars except 100 feet inside them. So I cannot use that as a rule when I'm talking about, the measurement has to be equal. That's why I'm happy with the agritourism, and I'm trying, and you heard me say this many times. I don't want to put ourselves in a position where our rights are pierced by a local government.
I think we all agree on that. And
So if you agree on that, then you cannot use any of this stuff.
no,
Unless they tell you we're gonna raise the noise level, we're gonna raise the light time, but they can do that. They have the authority to do it, we don't. They can vote on it, the council can vote on it, and out of the 5, and they might say, no, they're crazy, we're leaving it as it is. And come back.
but she's sitting there asking us for specifics. I understand that we're not qualified, but we could go do some research and see, and we could suggest an outlandish number.
My friend, I'm talking out of experience. This is not pain. I've been in this table and many other committees, and I'm telling you that that's beautiful, noble, and romantic, but it's not real life.
Might I just ask our experts, what have you seen other communities do? And where do you think that we can look to find something to help us? I know that we have challenged you already, Stephen, and I thank you, and we all thank you for the direction you've given us, but is there some place we can look? One of the things you and I talked about was Miami-Dade. A couple of years ago, we actually did look at what Miami-Dade had because one of their agritourism enterprises wanted to come up here. We didn't obviously look at any of that as we came forward with this. We just tried to pick out the wording in the state law. But where can we
So-
go for a model, or are we like breaking new ground?
A little bit of both. Miami-Dade did adopt an ordinance a couple years ago, and then they were in the middle of going through one that's been very controversial, and I would say it looks like it's dead at this point in time for now. They're reconsidering it at least, and they got off on a deal about allowing food trucks and everything else. It got really weird, as some things do in Miami-Dade. So I wouldn't necessarily. You can look and see what they currently have on the books. if you want to see where it is. I think some people like it. Some people think it exceeds the authority, but it has not been challenged. What they have adopted. Other areas have gone forward, and I said I can go back and look, and I can try to find some examples to send you. But most of the conversations I've had have been kind of the path you're going down, where they either adopt a agritourism specific and say these are the other code provisions in our that shall apply to the offsite impacts, or they just say we're not going to adopt an agritourism and we're just going to use these existing codes to address them. And it's been done a couple, I think, different ways, and then some have just decided not to do anything because it wasn't. They decided it wasn't worth going through doing the whole code adoption process. That's been my experience. Sarah, I know you've been involved in a lot of places around the state too. You may have some more that come to mind off the top of your head.
That sounds good. I can't think of anything else on the top of my head. Yeah, Miami-Dade, that seems to be dead for now, I think.
So they did adopt one several years ago. Is there any value in looking at the one that they had adopted a while back?
It is still in place. So
Yes.
yes, you could absolutely look at it. It does a lot of what you're talking about. It says, it sets up two conditions, right? I think it talks about agritourism on ag lands and agritourism on not on ag lands. That if you're on ag classified lands, you have these provisions. If you're agritourism activity on non-agricultural classified lands, these additional provisions shall apply. So it's, and then they get involved and they kind of wrap that up into the special event venues, and it gets kind of quirky from there. So, but yet they are on the books.
Is there one that you would suggest we model ourselves after?
So there aren't many that have actually gone forward and adopted full agritourism statutes that or agritourism ordinances that say agritourism offset impacts shall be this. The most of them have ended up deciding that we have these other codes that are already out there, and so we're just going to enforce these offsite impacts to those standards.
Okay, so our homework is to get you a list of relevant code sections, and you decide if they're relevant or not. You could say, hey, don't care about this.
That
Or-
wasn't my motion, but.
Hmm?
That wasn't my motion, but
No, I know it wasn't the motion. I'm trying to get the stuff I know right off the bat. Okay,
it should be for the council, town council, give us those parameters. Racing what, what it is currently on the code, since they're not feasible or realistic. So I have a motion. We vote on the motion.
we need a second.
I need a second. Who seconds it? If nobody seconds it, then it's dead. You second it?
No.
Then it's dead.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and give you the list of relevant code sections. Would you like to have fire rescue at your next meeting to talk about what the requirements are? Okay, because it's my understanding that they have written a manual. And they don't have to talk the whole night. They can just explain what the emergency access stuff is for them.
Pertaining to offsite impact.
Correct, just for that. And then, we'll go ahead and go get the old or the existing Miami-Dade, for you to look at and send it out. Not the recently proposed. And the next meeting is March 6th, that's 6 p.m. Is that everything?
So we're
Okay.
adjourned, yeah.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you both.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
Good night.
Please let
Thank
me
you
know
for
how I can be
including us.
helpful.
Okay.